Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video.
I'm Nancy Berlin. I'm a natural resource specialist with Cooperative Extension, and I coordinate the Master Gardener program. We have some really antsy Master Gardeners right now that want to get their hands in the dirt, but we're kind of limited on what we can do. So we're hoping that these Wednesday seminars will fill the need and for the public and also Master Gardener volunteers that are participating. We're going to be talking about controlling invasive plants today, and you notice I kind of changed the title to managing because I don't know that we ever can completely control them. Can everybody hear me okay?
The U.S. government defines an invasive plant species as one that is not native to a given ecosystem and whose introduction will cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. We consider native species those that occur without human intervention and were in North America prior to European settlement. They're natural checks and balances that keep their growth from being too excessive. When we look at non-native species, there are some good and some bad. The good ones tend to have economic value. If you think about turf grass, if you think about a lot of the crops that we produce for food, oranges are not native to the United States. Bananas, not native to the United States. Rice, not native to the United States. But we grow all of these. And these really pose little to no threat to natural ecosystems. Now, invasive species are non-native species that reproduce rapidly, spread over large areas, and have few or any natural controls, and this is what makes them a problem.
This video talks about several pesticides. While it's important to identify the weed that you're going to treat positively before you even think about using pesticides, once you've made that decision that you're going to use pesticides, you need to use them safely. All pesticides are poison and need to be used with care. Always read and follow all label instructions, especially those regarding how to use the pesticide, where to use the pesticide, what you can use the pesticides on, what personal protective equipment you need to wear to stay safe, and how to safely dispose and store that pesticide. Remember, the label is the law. When you buy a pesticide, you agree to follow that label, and it's a legal contract. If you follow the label and do all the things on the label, you'll be better able to protect yourself and the environment.
There we go. So you got to plan this out initially. Planning is the key to success with this and defining what your goals are. Most of the time our goal is to completely eradicate, but you're going to take inventory and identify the plants that are in your yard. Are they just run-of-the-mill weeds or are they invasive plants? And there's a huge difference between how you manage some common weeds and invasive plants. Invasive plants tend to have much bigger seed production. They tend to be much more aggressive. There's nothing in the community, in the environment that will eat them for the most part or kill them. And so we have to approach them a lot differently than we do regular weeds. You want to define where the weed is, and that will make a huge difference in how you control it. And before you ever start to remove anything, particularly near a waterway, you want to formulate a plan to revegetate ahead. And how are you going to prevent reentry? And what are you going to put in its place? Because we know that nature abhors a vacuum, and we need to plan for something else to be in the place of the invasive. Plan to monitor it frequently and be persistent. I've been managing some invasives on my property for 12 years now, and I'm making progress, but I have to go out and look regularly to make sure they're not taking over again. As I said, these are different. These aren't run-of-the-mill weeds, lawn weeds, or and chemicals are often necessary to eradicate or manage them. And while a lot of us appreciate being able to do things through biological controls or organic controls, invasive plants demand a lot more attention than that, and they often need chemicals to control them. I'm going to present some chemical management techniques in this PowerPoint, but we're not going to make any specific recommendations, because what we want you to do is, if you find something that you're not sure of, we want you to make sure that you send a picture or bring a sample when we're open again in the office, to let us make a proper identification. And we'll ask you some questions like, where is the plant located, and take into account environmental restrictions that might be in place for that, where that particular plant is, and also the timing of it. You know, we have some very odd weather this year, and because of that, the timing may be slightly different. So we're basing our recommendations from the Pest Management Guide from Virginia Tech, the 2020 edition, and some of the recommendations from Virginia Department of Forestry. And so Thomas Bowles or I would be able to give you those recommendations once we make sure we've identified the plant correctly. So here's some fundamentals. It's better to take action now while the plants are young, before they spread more, before they change the soil chemistry, and before they set seed. You always want to pull them or treat them before the seeds are there. You want to do it while they're still in that young growth stage. And you want to be meticulous about sanitation or disposal. Some invasive plants, you can leave them where they are and let them disintegrate. Some you want to put in, like on pavement and let the sun cook them. Some you don't even, you want to get off your property entirely. Some of the invasive plants have allelopathic tendencies, which means they're sending out toxins that keep other plants from growing nearby, which of course makes a big problem if you don't get the roots. Disturbing the soil as little as possible is important when you pull it out. And I know that's easier said than done. The seed bank is huge, and the more the soil is disturbed, the more seeds come to get light and moisture. This is a perfect day for removing invasive plants. The soil has been moist. It's easier to remove the whole root, even with a tap root. We'll talk about a little bit about foliar activated herbicide versus soil activated. Soil activated is a systemic. It goes through the plant, but a foliar activated herbicide requires certain conditions. The plant has to be actively growing, and if it was just injured by a mower, the top growth will regenerate, and you won't get the whole roots. It won't be transported to the roots to kill it. So you can see that this timing is a science as far as dealing with invasive plants. Always read and obey the herbicide label carefully and protect yourself. That's a legal contract between you and the company. And for some of these plants, they may not be listed on the label. And that's another real good reason for you to make a proper ID and to get us pictures of the plants so we can help you with management. If you're going to hire an applicator, you make sure that they're a licensed person and what techniques or herbicide they're going to use, and you're going to monitor their work and make sure that they're doing it safely. And we can provide you with guidelines for that too. So this is the home ground and animals. This is for homeowners. It's a pest management guide, and it is by no means an easy document to use. It is available as a PDF online, and it's searchable with the Control F function. Our recommendations today are from the home ground and animals, but many of the invasives are not listed in there. This is more for conventional weeds in your yard, but you can go online and take a look at this. But we always have to make sure we're identifying the plant correctly. There are a lot of lookalikes out there. So you can submit a sample to us on our email. Usually 2 megabytes or less per email is a good idea. So you can send multiple emails, so it's sure not to get blocked by the county email system. And you can send it to mastergardener@pwc.gov.org, and that is the Extension Horticulture Help Desk. And that's staffed by master gardener volunteers on weekdays, usually for a 2 to 3 hour shift. And they're doing a fantastic job at keeping up with all the requests for new gardens this spring. So here's some cultural controls. And cultural, I always think of as how do you make the plant healthy enough, and how do you provide for good growing conditions enough to keep your soil and your plants healthy. So these are non-chemical cultural controls. So you can exclude, and I'll show you some pictures of some ideas for that. You should inspect any soil, manure, or organic additives that you get. Sometimes you can't see these seeds, they're tiny. And I know that I've purchased some things that I think that have borne some seeds of invasive plants, and I live to regret it. Use only certified grass seed. You can use cover crops in places that you cannot plant. Now that's a farming technique, but in areas of my yard where I haven't replanted invasive, sometimes I'll put down that the picture shows crimson clover. If I have a spot that I want to plant something in later, and I don't want to overrun with maybe stiltgrass, I'll put a cover crop in, and we have a list of cover crops that you can put in for summer, fall, winter. And that keeps the soil covered and active and prevents weeds or invasive plants from coming in. You can cultivate, hoe, hand weed. The best thing in your lawn, if you find invasive species of plants, is to have a really thick, healthy turf. And to get that, our Best Lawns program is the best bet. And it's a master gardener comes to your home, measures the square footage, takes a soil test, and based on that science, staff prepare a nutrient management plan to give you thick, healthy turf, and that shades out weeds and invasive plants. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that program on the next slide. Of course, mulching, and that's a form of exclusion, is a way to keep invasives at bay. Here's our Best Lawns program. We're temporarily suspended because of COVID-19, but you can still obtain, not abstain, but obtain, sorry about that typo. You can still obtain a soil test kit by contacting our office, and we can send one out in the mail to you. And because we're not preparing those plans right now for you, we can talk you through tips on managing your lawn. But maybe look ahead to fall, because that's the best time to fertilize and apply amendments and overseed. Anyway, you can find out more information by asking our Master Gardener help desk. So this is these are the priorities, the suggested order of removal. If you have Tree of Heaven, and I'll show you some pictures of all these in a little bit, it's allelopathic, which means it's sending out toxins, keeping other things from growing around it. Very, very difficult to eradicate. And you got to start early and be really persistent with it. And if you have that on your property, I would say that would be your first priority, to eliminate that over time. Next, vines that might climb up your trees and damage them. Chinese wisteria, Japanese honeysuckle, Oriental bittersweet are all really effective tree killers. So, and also English ivy would fall in that group also. Next, focus on shrubs and herbaceous plants and ground covers, because when you open up the canopy later by removing the trees, those invasive plants are going to even multiply more because they'll have more sun access. And then last, other trees like Bradford pears, mimosa, autumn olive, and I'll show you some pictures of all of those. So here's some tips on hand pulling. And I think I've been spending most of my evenings doing this. You pull in the spring or fall. Again, this is a great time to do it while the soil is moist. You can pry up a section of the soil with your shovel. I use a tool that has a hook on it, and it kind of breaks the soil apart. I'm able to take the root out and set them aside for disposal, and then put the soil back in place. And again, you're trying to minimize your any tilling up of the soil. start from one side and work on the leading edge and do one section at a time and just be persistent. You're going to bag or remove all pieces, and I'll have hints later in the PowerPoint on how to dispose of different types of plants. And again, have your plan to replant immediately, and we would recommend native plants. Next Wednesday, we'll be doing a follow-up class to this on what native plants you can put in the place of invasives for seasonal color, habitat, and beauty. And so I hope you'll join us at 11 o'clock next Wednesday. Revisit your area, monitor it, and make sure. It can take 2 to 5 years to make sure that you still have it up, and they can still re-enter after that if they're in your neighbor's yard or birds have transported it. These are 2 tools for the really stubborn weeds. The weed wrench and the root talon, they're for larger, more woody plants or vines. You can bush hog an area. I was participating in an activity at a public facility where they use bush hog to remove bamboo, and that's a huge job. Mowing, of course, can control if you get it before it goes to the seed head stage, covering and smothering, or grazing, and I'll show you some photos of those. And the more soil disturbance you have, the more seeds you're going to expose to the surface and to the sunlight. So let's look at some trees and woody plants and some techniques. Woody vines, Lonicera japonica, which is Japanese honeysuckle. It starts out herbaceous, but it ends up as a woody vine. So I would put that, the older Japanese honeysuckle would fall into this category. You can cut it down and air dry it. These are the pieces you're taking out. These are not dealing with the chemical. This is strictly mechanical control. You can chip and compost it if it hasn't flowered yet. If it's flowered or has seed heads on it, don't compost it. I would leave it on site to dry out and monitor it. Don't send it to a commercial or municipal compost site. You can construct a brush pile, which has varying degrees of success. If you live in an HOA or a real tidy community, this is not a possibility. And if you can construct a brush pile, make it away from your house, because of course white-footed mice can congregate there, and they're carriers of tick and Lyme disease. You can incinerate, of course, that's according to the rules, the weather and the rules of your community. You can use this firewood locally, but don't move it to another place, and be careful what you're burning. So here's what these plants look like now, just a few of them. And these are courtesy of Blue Ridge Prism, which is an invasive control group, a nonprofit. You can go to their website, and I think they'll be updating these. This is what the Gallery pear or the Bradford pear looks like right now for the new growth. Next one is autumn olive, Elaeagnus, and if you flip an autumn olive leaf over, it's silvery on the back. That's the best way you can tell. It has really attractive berries that wildlife like them. It was brought in as a erosion control and for wildlife value, but now it's escaped, and it's that and Bradford pear are filling our forests. Chinese privet is one that I have a long relationship with. It has opposite leaves, kind of shiny. The berries that come off are favorites of birds, and they're blue, and it's a prolific berry producer. And so I probably pull up a couple hundred of these every other week until I finally convince my neighbor that I would like to chop his down. So the next one is Japanese barberry, and you may have that even in your landscape. It has thorns. It has an interesting red color in the fall, but it's highly invasive, and it also harbors white-footed mice, which harbor the tick and Lyme disease. So you want to get that out of your property so it doesn't reseed, but also it doesn't put you at risk for ticks. So here's some herbaceous. Now our herbaceous plant has soft stems. And here's what some of them look like right now. They look pretty innocent right now, but they're not. This is Japanese honeysuckle, and note that, can you see my cursor here? This leaf right here is lobed, but they become less lobed as they get more mature. And it's a vine, and the stem is often kind of reddish. So both shape of leaves can be on the same plant. This is what wineberry is coming up like, the new seedlings. Hairy, thorny stem, reddish. Looks like a raspberry leaf. Wineberries are delicious, but they're super aggressive and not something you want to let get out of control in your property. This is garlic mustard, and this is really pretty much what it looks like right now. It has the white flower on top and the deeply veined heart-shaped leaves. They're kind of shiny, and it's pretty stealth. I find it tucked behind a tree in my wooded area, or I'll find it in the woods behind my home. Again, it is allelopathic. It sends out toxins around it to keep other native plants and other plants from growing near it.
Nancy, can we take a couple questions
Yes.
here real quick?
Of course.
So someone had asked about, could you say the name of the company that you got the pictures from again?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit. I think I might have put it on. I thought I had it on the slide, but it's Blue Ridge Prism, PRISM. And if you Google them, it's a nonprofit, and they provided these pictures today. And they have literature for your community if you need another one.
Yeah, can you differentiate between wineberry and blackberries?
Yeah, wineberry is, well, there are invasive blackberries too. But there are native blackberries and raspberries. They're not, all of them would be aggressive. All of them are heavy cedars. This is actually the definition of an invasive plant is that it causes economic or ecological damage. And so that's the way these plants make it on the invasive list. And so, I would remove anything from your property that's listed as invasive. And I'll give you some references so that you can read through it later from the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Department of Game and Inland Fisheries have listings. So here it is, Blue Ridge Prism at the bottom of the screen. Did that answer the question? So yes. Winter creeper is another one. Go ahead. Okay. So, and you can see it has a light veins. Oriental bittersweet, that looks so innocent, but it's the worst. And you can hardly find native bittersweet any longer in the woods because this has taken over so much. Birds love the orange berries. On the battlefield, on some of the trails, it's killing a lot of the trees. And of course, everybody's familiar with English ivy. And it can grow up trees and damage the bark, but also harbor insects underneath and fungal diseases underneath the leaves when it's growing up trees. So our current weather pattern is perfect for removing and hand pulling invasive plants. So that will be your afternoon homework. So you want to remove most of the roots. Whatever's left of the root system is going to regrow. So after treating, after pulling, after mechanical removal, you're going to air dry all these prior to flowering so the birds can't get the seeds. Again, you can construct brush piles, bag and dispose of. So here's an example of exclusion in an urban setting. These volunteers here are putting down newspaper or cardboard, I can't tell, and then smothering it basically. But before you do this, you want to mow or weed whip it low to the ground You remove as much as possible. You want to do this before it has seed heads on it, and use cardboard or newspapers with all the tape removed, black or white, not the colored pages, and you're going to overlap them. Saturate with water, that's real important. As you add it, you're going to hose it down and cover 1 to 2 feet beyond the edges, beyond the area that's infested. And maintain this cover for 4 to 6 months. You don't want to put this around trees, though. This can keep the oxygen intake of the tree roots. It can damage the tree and make it more susceptible to problems. So do this in an open area, not near tree roots. Here's another example of exclusion with a mulched path. It looks like they're going to have to go back like in a week for that one. And here's another picture. We've done this at the teaching garden in Bristol. You've probably heard of lasagna gardening. And that's where you can put down cardboard and then layer. You don't have to have this many layers, or you can mulch and compost at the top and put a cover crop in. This would be something you would do now for planting in the fall, because we are entering a season of warmer weather, and planting plants now is probably not as good an idea as planting in the fall. So one caveat again, don't put this near tree roots. Occultation, that is a different term. It's kind of the same idea, but you're making a dark, warm, moist environment. And you can put a weed barrier down. A lot of farmers use this. Some vegetable gardeners, flower farmers use this. But you could do it in a smaller area as a homeowner and pin down with landscape pins a weed barrier, and it basically cooks it. And if you take it up and there's still growth, you can just lay it back down and come back later. Solarization is another term that you might hear used, and that relies on the sun and clear plastic. The key here is watering that area deeply before you put the clear plastic on. You want to pick a thick enough plastic so that you can reuse it, so you're not throwing out plastic all the time. And you're going to bury the edges in the soil to trap the heat in and the moisture. And this is a good thing to do in the summer. Leave it on for at least 4 weeks in the hottest part. I don't think you have to clear all the debris, but if there are plants that have gone to seed, then you're going to have to deal with regrowth of those. So I would start this process again before the seed head forms. Here's using a weed wrench on invasive plants in a meadow. They're fairly easy to use because sometimes I don't have the strength to pull it up, and this is a great simple tool that will help you to get the roots up. Keep in mind that when you're walking through an area with lots of invasive plants, your shoes will carry some of the seeds with you. They're tiny, particularly Stiltgrass is what I'm thinking of. And your dog can carry seeds from place to place too. So I pretty much try to leave my shoes in the area that I'm working, or in a shed or something. There are goats that commercial properties have hired goats, and these are the plants that they particularly like. You can Google this and find a company if you have a big area, and they love poison ivy, and poison ivy is a native plant, but nevertheless, they love kudzu and bittersweet. Japanese honeysuckle, multiflora rose, and tree of heaven, which is ailanthus milaminate, but they don't like stiltgrass, unfortunately. So when we talk about herbicidal controls, there's a backpack. There's different things that you can use. You can use a backpack sprayer, and here this one has a kind of looks like a milk jug put on it to contain the flow to a certain area. You're going to have to, with any of these, you're going to have to be extremely careful not to hit non-target plants. This is this is like a sponge applicator that will, and this shows a basal bark application of herbicide. And you're going to, they often recommend that you treat the lower 12 to 18 inches of the stem. Here's a few more pictures. This is a cut stump. You only need to spray the cambium for that. And these are more arborist type of controls. These are what professionals would use. And there are times when I'm going to recommend that you not do the application yourself. Hack and squirt, basal spray, wicking with a sponge can go on the leaves or the bark, depending on the plant and depending on the herbicide. And you can girdle a tree. This might be helpful with Ailanthus, but it is going to send out shoots to grow back. As soon as there is a wound, the tree, any plant will try to repair that wound by stepping up the growth process. So this isn't a one-shot and done deal. Here's painting on the stump, bark injections. These are all things that your professional applicator, you need a professional applicator probably to help you with. So there are concerns with herbicide use, and that's why we want to make sure that the plant that you're worried about is identified correctly, that the timing is correct, that you're protected, that you're using the right chemical, but also the environmental concerns for your area. If you're near any stream or even an intermittent stream or a wetland, herbicides can contaminate surface or groundwater. You can accidentally apply it to desirable species, and certainly don't want that to happen. It can disturb nesting areas. Some of the chemicals are toxic to, particularly to amphibians, if they have a surfactant, which is the thing that helps to adhere the herbicide to a plant. You can use it improperly, and there's a personal risk with many of these herbicides. Again, if you're going to hire a professional applicator, make sure they have a license, ask them for it, and monitor their work. And these are all the things that you need to look at on the label. It's a big deal to use these herbicides. And manual removal, mechanical removal might be your better option. These are the formulations of Roundup. It's glyphosate. It's not just glyphosate anymore in Roundup. All the Roundup varieties have a lot of different additives, and so we're not buying just one product anymore. The one in the middle that just has glyphosate in it is probably the least toxic one of these, and used correctly, it is a good thing to use that even my non-herbicidal friends and professional colleagues, there are times when you have to use this to combat invasive plants. The other ones stay in the soil, different times, so some of them will kill a tree. If you get it on the tree roots will take up the chemicals. So I would recommend you read the label carefully and make sure that you only get the least toxic alternative, and that would be the middle one, glyphosate. So you can tell that this isn't an easy task, that a multi-pronged approach to getting rid of invasive plants is needed, because there's heavy seeders, they're fast growers, there's nothing that will eat them or destroy them biologically. Mechanical removal, sanitation and cleaning it up, and making sure that you don't disturb the soil. Using a chemical may be necessary, making sure that you cover and replant, and then going back and monitoring it. All these things are necessary. So let's look at some particular unfavorite invasive plants. This is Stiltgrass. That's not a great picture, but I'll show you a few more. And it's just popping up now. And this is, Stiltgrass can produce 50,000 seeds per square foot. and they can stay viable in the soil for years and years. And I've heard varying degrees, 10 years, 10 plus years. It's easy to spread. The seeds are tiny, so they come in on your dog's fur or paws or your shoes or your clothing. And it can be very difficult to control. It is an annual grass, though, which is our saving hope if we can make sure it doesn't go to seed and then be persistent enough to deal with the seed bank as it regrows, or making sure the ground is covered with an alternate ground cover. So we want, if you're unsure whether you got Stiltgrass, we need a sample when we open up again in the office, or we need a photo of it. And we need a clear photo. This one's fuzzy, but this is what the seed head looks like. A lot of, you can see the stem is fine. The leaf is pointed and it's small and thin. It has a light midrib, kind of a off-white, lighter colored rib down the middle, the midline of the leaf. And the seeds, you know, it's just popping up now, and it'll probably go to seed in August, depending on the weather. I'm starting to hand pull this early in the season and putting down, I'm putting down some clover seed where I pull so that it will have at least something to compete with. You can mow it when it gets to about 3 inches, but before the seed head forms. It's going to require multiple strategies and attempts. And, you know, really our Best Lawns program and managing your turf to make it thick and healthy. Stiltgrass won't ever, the seeds won't see the light of day if you have a real thick turf. So that's probably the easiest, best defense. This is what it looked like yesterday. It's just starting to come up. So I hand pulled those and I put down some other seed, and I'm sure more will wash in, but that's what it looks like in your yard today. So here's the chemical controls that we provide to our Best Lawns clients. It's too late now to use a pre-emergent. It's getting difficult to find the window to use a pre-emergent in. It's earlier for crabgrass than for crabgrass, about late February, weather permitting, and you probably will need to reapply. Finaxaprop is a post-emergent. This is most effective when the Stiltgrass is young. Again, you may need repeated applications. Glyphosate is non-selective. Remember the picture I just showed you of Roundup? And that's the trade name. So whatever you apply it to, it will kill. It will harm turf. It'll harm desirable plants. It's non-selective. It will kill everything. Some of these products cannot be used near waterways, including small streams and wetlands. This is a fairly new one, but we're starting to see it coming in from Fairfax County. Wavy leaf basket grass. You can see it has kind of a rippled leaf, and the seeds, I think each of those pods where the hand is, you know, there are multiple seeds in each one of those, hundreds of seeds. It has an arching habit, and the seeds are sticky. They're like they're like Velcro, and it's perennial, unfortunately. And the stolons, it travels by stolons under the soil, which lets it spread easily without even knowing it. Department of Forestry, this is not in our pest management guide, but the Department of Forestry suggests that you hand pull when the soil is moist, and the seeds form April through August. So I haven't seen this in my yard yet, but it's coming. Fairfax has it quite a few places. You got to remove all the stolons, the underground stems, and a foliar herbicide when the plant is actively growing, April through October, glyphosate. This is garlic mustard. I bet you can find this in your yard now. This is the taproot, and you want to get all of the taproot, remembering that this is allelopathic. It flowers the second year. So some have escaped me, and I find them flowering still in my yard. You can see a deeply veined leaf, kind of shiny white flower. Sleeks is the name of the seed pod right here. And each of those contains lots of seeds. And they're not producing now, but they will produce soon. the seed pods. It's a biennial, so it flowers the second year. This is not in our pest management guide. The last time I checked, this is very characteristic growth pattern here. Pull when the soil's moist, perfect time to pull it now. Get the taproot, bag them both. Don't throw them on the ground because remember, this has allelopathy and you'll keep other things from growing there. You might keep stiltgrass from growing there. You're going to bag up the seed pods and the plants. After you take them out of the ground, sometimes a plant will have a stress reaction and produce viable seeds earlier if you leave it sitting in place to preserve its future. Glyphosate plus triclopyr is the recommended chemical. Department of Forestry. Triclopyr does stay in the soil. It persists in the soil. Glyphosate does not. Glyphosate may harm soil organisms, though. Winter application for foliar when the ground isn't frozen, and that keeps your native plants that might be growing near it safer, because you're just applying it to the plant you want, and you're applying it to the leaves. Applying herbicide in March or April to prevent it from flowering. You know, frankly, in March or April, I think it's just easier if you have moist soil to just pull it. May is too late to apply herbicide. So that's your choice right now, mechanical removal. Here's Japanese honeysuckle. Again, we mentioned it before. I bet you've never even seen the berries on this, but they're very attractive to birds. And the reason we see them is because they're eaten off probably before we ever get there. But it disguises itself. Sometimes the leaves are rippled with lobes like this, and sometimes they have no teeth, and it looks like this. It's a vine. You can see here it is girdling a tree. Can do a real damage in a forest. These are the flowers. And next Wednesday, when we do the Zoom session on what natives to use to replace these invasives, we'll talk a little bit about the native honeysuckle, which is a beautiful alternative to this. Again, good time to pull small vines. You can cut the large climbing vines, and when it starts to regrow, use glyphosate for a non-selective herbicide protecting the plants around it. Triclopyr could also be used in July through November. And the cut stump procedure is when you cut and they paint it on, apply glyphosate or triclopyr 20% to the stems to keep it from regrowing. And that you can only use glyphosate again when things are out. It's still sold in the trade. You can still find it online. But it is one nasty invasive. You can see why people
Nancy?
might have, yes.
Can you go back and say what you just said again? You froze up and we lost sound for you for a second.
Okay.
That last part on Japanese honeysuckle.
Okay, so Japanese, this is honeysuckle control from the Virginia Department of Forestry. This would be a perfect time to cut small vines and pull them up by the root. If you have a large, thick, woody climbing vine, you'll need to do something with a chemical. And the chemical of choice is glyphosate on the leaves, foliar, July through November. Triclopyr can also be used, but remember, it does persist in the soil. Cutting the stump, like I showed you in the pictures, you can do this actually year-round, except when it's not actively growing. Honeysuckle tends to grow on warm days in the winter, and you can apply triclopyr or glyphosate to the stems. Any other questions about that?
No, I think we're good.
This is porcelain berry. Okay, this is porcelain berry, and it's available in the trade still. You can still buy this plant, unfortunately. You can see why somebody might like it. The seeds start off purple and they go to blue as they ripen. Birds find them attractive. There's a variation of leaf shape. You can see this one looks sort of like a mulberry leaf almost. And sometimes you might just find the vine without any berries on it. So you'll have to be able to ID the vine, but it also can look more like heart-shaped. These are the flowers. You can see it has really affected a lot of our natural areas, particularly in the eastern part of Prince William County. They're dry, hard fruits. Okay, and I'm going to show you a picture to compare it. Here's another picture of porcelain berry. And here's the comparison with wild grapes. You can see for wild grapes, the berries hang down in clusters, and they're purple or black. And they have peeling bark. It's, you know what a grapevine wreath looks like. Well, it has peeling bark, and the leaves don't have any hair on the veins. If you take a cut of the stem, the pith inside is brown, and grapevines have tendrils. Let's compare that to porcelain berry. These are what the berries look like. They're not hanging down in clusters. The bark is not peeling. The stems are smooth. There's hair on the veins of the leaves. Again, the leaf is a really different shape too. The pith, if you cut it, is white, the inside of the stem, and they're tendrils just like in the wild grape. The entire root system must be removed. And I'd hate to be a cynic, but it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get the whole root system. So mowing or weed whacking it, getting it before it has those attractive fruits. And again, a foliar application, which is on the leaves. This takes more than just glyphosate, most often, Triclopyr plus glyphosate. And one of those formulations were listed in the Roundup slide has that formulation in it. You can do a cut stump and cut the vines, treat it with glyphosate or triclopyr or a basal spray to the lowest 12 inches of the stem. This is Oriental bittersweet, and it's a really pretty plant, but our native bittersweet is even prettier. This is you can see the damage it's done here. It can twist around. Silver Lake has quite a bit of this. The Battlefield has quite a bit of this. And if you see these gold orange berries in the fall, you can pretty much count on it being the Oriental bittersweet and not the native. It's hard to find the native ones anymore. This is a comparison of the invasive bittersweet, which is the Asian bittersweet, and the American bittersweet. You can see the berry clusters are different. The Asian bittersweet has yellow and orange berries, and the covering of the berry. And the American bittersweet, the berries are on the end of the stems, and they're clustered there. Again, a weed wrench might be useful for this. And if you keep cutting it to the ground, a plant will exhaust its resources, but don't count on that to completely get rid of the root system. Here, excuse me. Here are the chemical recommendations for foliar, basal, and cut stump. You can also hack it and squirt it with triclopyr or glyphosate. And here's the timing. You can see that the timing varies on this so much that you really have to know the plant and its habit before you can properly use an herbicide. And again, many of these invasive plants are not listed on the herbicide label. So come to us, we're glad to help you. Kudzu was brought in for erosion control, and also it's a nitrogen fixing plant. Because it's in that family, Fabiaceae family. The flower is really pretty. I'm sure you've seen this driving up and down 95 and it does some huge damage. It can grow 50 feet in one season. And because it has tubers under the soil, it can store food, and it can replenish the plant pretty darn easy. Foliar spray needs monthly or yearly competition. I know Fairfax County over by the Water Authority, they come out and they do that 3 or 4 times a year. You have to plan for restoration. What are you going to put in its place? And a lot of times it'll take the trees down that are already there. It's the seeds float and it spreads. Those tubers can send out new shoots. Mechanical removal, mattock, hose, saws, weed wrench, cutting, and again, the multi-pronged approach. Restricted use herbicides are used for this. You need to call a professional applicator most of the time for this, unless it's a small area, which is the way it grows. It's doubtful that it's a small area. This is a weed wick, again, to just, this applicator on the top picture is using double layered gloves to apply pesticides to a certain plant. Unless you have the proper gloves, I wouldn't recommend you doing that. But sometimes professionals or people that work in the field can use that technique so they can isolate the herbicide use just on that plant. Mylaminate or tear thumb, if you pick it up, it makes you break it into tears because it has little thorns all over it, barbs. Triangular shaped leaves. There are a couple native plants that look sort of like this, one being hog peanut. So we want a proper idea. You can see it has those pretty blueberries also. And I don't think it grows a mile in a minute, but it's pretty close. A lot of the parks in Fairfax County are dealing with this. The best treatment is the end of June for mile a minute. Wear long sleeves and gloves because it hurts. Foliar application of either glyphosate or triclopyr, depending on the timing, or you can use a pre-emergent. And I think this is another one that I would recommend you get a qualified licensed professional to help you with. Multiflora rose, this is very, very common in our yards and our parks. This leaves out before a lot of the native plants, and it has profuse rose hips that are attractive to birds. It was brought in for erosion control. And has totally gotten out of hand. It looks like a rose, and the rose hips look like our rose hips, only they're smaller, and there are more of them, so more seeds are produced. This is also a vector for some of the viruses that we're seeing in our native roses and our ornamental knockout roses. And so there is a mite, an Oriental mite that is attracted to multiflora rose. If you have that in your multiflora in your yard, or you live next to a natural area that has it, your roses can be at risk from that mite transmitting through its saliva the virus to your roses. Mechanical removal, that's what I do in my yard when the soil is wet. I'll probably find one a day. You can cut or bulldoze big areas. This is another one. If you have a very large area, it would be very, very wise to use a professional applicator. You'll see down here under cut stump, it can volatilize. That's not just a problem with this particular chemical, but if a chemical herbicides in the air, and little droplets of it can get on desirable plants. So
Nancy,
you can see that
cutting out
timing
again.
and use of these herbicides is really okay. So
Start with
should I go back to
volatility.
volatilize?
Yes.
Yeah. So for some of these herbicides, it's important that you follow the label directions because it can volatilize at certain temperatures. And that means droplets can go into the air if the air is too hot or if it's too windy. And so that's a risk to your desirable plants around you. So again, this may be, if you have a big area, that it may be the time to get a licensed professional to help you. Autumn olive is starting to flower right now. The seeds are formed into fruit. Sweet red berries, they're edible. Our wildlife like them. It was brought in as a wildlife plant. The flowers are fragrant. On the back of the leaf, the underside is silvery, and it creates a huge population explosion because the seeds are so, I mean, the fruits are so desirable for wildlife. There's a closer up picture. It's hard to remove this all by hand. A weed wrench might help if the soil is moist. Repeated cuttings without herbicide are very ineffective. I've seen it successfully removed through bulldozing, and you want to get it before the fruits are present. Here's some other chemical recommendations with the timing. Chinese privet. The leaves are opposite on the stem. The flowers are fragrant. The berries are profuse. It reseeds very easily. They're attractive to, the berries are attractive to birds. You can hand pull or weed wrench this, cut or bulldoze. It's not effective without herbicide. I had a couple of these trees taken down, and they're already, I think I had them taken down in March, and they're already growing back pretty quickly. So I'm gonna need to do something more aggressive. Tree of Heaven, this is Ailanthus, and you can see it has opposite leaves. It looks like some other plants. It looks a little like sumac, or it looks a little like black walnut or ash. Sometimes people mistake them. So you need to make sure that that's what you've got. If you break off a stem and you smell the stem, it smells like stale peanut butter or worse. The new foliage can be red tinged. It can turn yellow in the fall. These are some other lookalikes. You'll see sumac in the middle there. And that's not the poisonous sumac, that's a native sumac. A black walnut looks similar. Ash looks a little similar. And so make sure that you have Ailanthus before you come up with a plan. This takes repeated applications of herbicide. There's no other way to get rid of it except for small seedlings. Spotted lanternflies show a strong preference for Tree of Heaven, among other plants. And so if you have a Tree of Heaven on your property and you're interested in helping us monitor for spotted lanternfly, you can contact me, and by May 15th, and we can help you get started with putting a trap up on your Ailanthus. If you're not going to take it down right away, you can see what the egg mass looks in photo A. It's really hard to spot. And so that's what we would be finding right now. So we have a training program through our extension service for volunteers to help us with this. And that's master gardeners or the public. And I can put you in touch. But again, we're only putting the monitoring on Ailanthus trees right now. If you have bamboo, you might want to just move. But really calling a professional, this is going to take bush hogging, repeated applications of herbicide. Give us a call and we can tell you what we would recommend a professional use. Phragmites, you find these a lot at the shore, northern neck area, but I've seen them around here, around quarries, and the seeds are prolific, so sometimes those get transported to our neighborhoods. It takes a lot of times these grow in wet areas, by streams, by the Chesapeake Bay, and you need a specialized formula for use in aquatic areas. And so this will probably take a professional applicator. Here's some resources that you can go to take a look. And this presentation will be emailed to you as a PDF, and it'll be available on our YouTube channel also for viewing later. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Looks like
yeah.
I'm unstable. Okay. And we can help you. So here's how to get in touch with us. You can send pictures of insects, plants to ID, areas that you need a plant recommendation for to our Master Gardener Help Desk. We can help you identify, know how to manage properly, and give you some recommendations for ground covers. Also, you should follow us on Facebook, VCE-Prince William Master Gardeners. We put timely tips up almost every day. And it's research-based information. That's what we share. Our teaching garden page is VCE Master Gardeners of PWC. Our YouTube channel is posted here too. And again, we're going to link this presentation and ask you to do a short evaluation. If you can return that to us, it's quick and easy to do. If you have any questions, remember that next Wednesday we'll be doing a follow-up presentation on what you can replace these invasives with on your property, and it will be focusing on native plants. Are there any other questions?
We don't have anything in the chat box. I think we've got them all answered.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you again next Wednesday. Is it at, excuse me, it's at 11 o'clock, Thomas?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you think of questions between now and then, just send us an email at the mastergardener@pwcgov.org email, and we'll get it answered. If you enjoyed this video, please let us know with your questions, comments, and suggestions for other classes and videos. For more information on lawns and gardens, contact the Extension Horticulture Help Desk at mastergardener@pwcgov.org. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.